So it looks like, who are we missing? I see David, I see Jack, missing Bud. Do I see, did I see Tom on there a minute ago?
Tom's here. You're going to have to take a roll call vote.
Right.
Just for
Okay,
quorum.
that must be. All right, are we ready to start, or?
We are ready to start.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jim Sabin, and I'm the chair of the Drive-In Site Utilization Committee. I'll be taking a roll call for quorum, so let me start with that now. David Reed, are you present?
Present.
Jack McCormick.
Present.
Bud Nugent. Not here. Rich Bilski. Not here. Tom Roach. Tom Roach?
Tom is muted.
He's muted, but he's here.
He's muted, but he's here. Okay. Okay. With a quorum present, I will now call the meeting to order, and I'll ask the moderator, Kathy, to explain how the remote participation will work before proceeding, and I will pay close attention.
As a precautionary measure to reduce the spread of the coronavirus, all town buildings are closed to the public, and the September 8th, 2020 Drive-In Site Utilization Committee meeting will be held by remote participation. My name is Kathy Williams, and I'm the Yarmouth Town Planner and will be serving as a moderator for this virtual meeting. Although no in-person attendance will be permitted, every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings. And I do just want to make note that we do have some people in attendance. We have Adam Epstein, Joe Cosin, Mary Ellen Doherty, and Raymond Dewey. Persons who would like to view or listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by watching via this virtual meeting or dialing in on the number provided in the meeting notice. We'll also post a recording of this meeting on the Town of Yarmouth website as soon as we are able. Please be patient as we work to overcome any technological challenges. For all meetings, to reduce confusion during the meeting, all audience participants will come in muted. Participants will be unmuted when called upon to speak by the chair or moderator. All votes must be roll call votes. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself to avoid unnecessary background noise, and do not use speakerphone or Bluetooth devices when speaking. For applicants or presenters, we don't have any today. For public participation, although the DISAC meeting is not a public hearing requiring a public comment period, at the discretion of the chair, comments or questions for the public may be taken. Members of the public may speak by selecting the raise hand button and waiting for the chair to call on them to speak. If you are dialing in on the phone number provided, you can press *9 on the phone to indicate you would like to comment. Members of the public who are recognized by the chair are asked to identify themselves by first and last name and affiliation for the public record, and then provide their comment each time they speak. I will now hand the meeting back to the chairman.
Thank you, Kathy. So, Kathy, can I see here when somebody asks to speak? Is there a
I will notify you if someone raises their hand and would like an opportunity to speak. Right now, no one has their hand raised.
Okay, thank you very much. So the members of the committee had the opportunity to go over and view the site, and I'm assuming most, if not all, have attended an event or been by during an event. The purpose of the meeting is obviously to discuss and review existing special event operations and future use of the drive-in, preparation considerations for recommendations for updating the Board of Selectmen. So we're asked to go in front of the board on the 15th to give them an update and talk about the pros and cons and pluses and minuses of the process that we've undergone so far. We will open that general discussion, but before I do that, I would like to skip one item and go right to minute meetings and get them out of the way. So if I can ask for a motion to accept the minutes to the August 4th, 2020 meeting. Everybody has those?
So moved.
Moved by David. Second. Is there a second?
Jack and Tom are still muted.
Okay, I saw Jack talking but not hearing. So.
Second that.
Okay, Jack seconded. Okay, any discussion on the August 4th meeting? Having none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Roll call vote.
Okay, sorry, we got a roll call because we're online, sorry. Roll call. David?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Tom?
Can
Tom
somebody
say
tell
yes?
Tom, you're still muted. Kathy, can you
Yes.
unmute him?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Hi, Jack. Hi, Tom. Good to see you there.
Ah.
Okay, so, and I am a yes as well, so that's unanimous for the August 4th meeting. I'll ask the same for the August 27th meeting. Do I have a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second, Jack McCormick.
So motion by Tom, second by Jack. Roll call. All in favor, David,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
and myself. So those are unanimous. So thank you for getting that house cleaning up out of the way. So let's go back to the discussion of the former drive-in site and where we're at now. Kathy or Karen, do you want to weigh in to start this, or do you want me to just keep on going?
You can certainly keep going. I think the whole idea, you've explained it fairly well, of what we're trying to do is the Board of Selectmen, they've heard some comments from some of the neighbors, and they wanted the DISAC to go out and investigate how the operation was going, what was being done to address some of these concerns, and then also come and make a recommendation or an update to the board so that they understand what's happening there. They just wanted the DISAC to get involved and take a look at all of this.
Okay. Let me ask, has everybody had an opportunity to visit the site? I know Dave has, Jack. Tom, have you had an opportunity to go over?
Yes.
Okay. And have everybody gone over during an event or a performance or a movie or?
Yes.
And have you had an opportunity to visit the neighborhood? Not necessarily visit the neighbors, but the neighborhood.
Well, I've driven through it during an event.
Okay. And that's Tom.
Yes.
Jack?
Yeah, no, I have not been to an event. I have visited the site and I have visited the neighborhood. But I don't have any personal experience about the sound, but my daughter and son-in-law who live next door to me on Kane Avenue, who have much better hearing than I do, said that they can hear it on Bryant Circle. And my oldest son, who is down over the weekend, said he could also hear the entertainment over in Bryant Circle at my house. So that's two on Bryant Circle. I want to make clear that they told me that neither one of them found it excessive or offensive or anything like that. It was just a little background.
Okay, so
Jim, I've
Briar,
been over,
go ahead. Go ahead,
yeah,
Dave.
I've been over several times into the neighborhood, driving around on my own, and I've also had some direct communication with some of the neighbors. In my visits to the neighborhoods, my timing has been horrible. The one day I spent the most time out there, it happened to be a comedy show and not a music event. And I did not find the sound to be particularly offensive anywhere that I went during that night. The second time I went out in response to a phone call that I received saying that the sound was intolerable to some of the neighbors. By the time I got there, the concert was over. They broke up at about 8:30 that night. I don't know why so early. So I haven't experienced from the neighborhood perspective any of the worst nights of sound. But I have spoken with several of the neighbors and had some direct emails from some of them. And they couldn't be more complimentary to Adam in terms of his responsiveness, his willingness to be inventive and to try new things. And apparently he's resolved several of their complaints. The honking of horns was one of the first big complaints. The speakers that the performers themselves use for their own feedback was one of the major complaints. And as we discussed at our site visit a couple weeks ago, Adam has addressed that by controlling those speakers and by using earphones for the performers rather than projection of the noise. And as we now see in Kathy's email today, they're either have implemented or about to implement a control of the drum noise, which I think will be a significant advantage to the neighborhood. But they're still not happy. At least those closest to the site, mostly on Pawnee Road, are still unhappy that night after night they have concerts out there when they were expecting either recreational use, which we originally discussed, or movies, which was the next proposal. I don't think they anticipated, nor did we necessarily, that there would be a regular progression of live or video concerts. So I think there's a concern that we need to address, or at least keep in mind in all decisions we make in the future about what kind of events are going to be there. And as we discussed with Adam Epstein last time we got together at the site, he needs to think about if he's going to do this for the rest of this season and in the future, how better to control the noise vis-a-vis the residential neighborhood. So I think one of my, if we're on the topic of the broader use of the site, one of my major concerns has been in recent weeks that this site has now been dominated by one user for the entire season. And this season, that's been great because he's kind of the only game in town. We haven't had anything else to choose from. But I think going forward, our vision was that this would be a site for multiple events, different kinds of events throughout the year. And with the investment that he's had to make this work for this summer, it doesn't look like it's compatible with anybody else having any use of that site during an entire summer. No fairs, no concerts, no whatever. So I think we need to be mindful of that going forward, whether this is a desirable use of the site in terms of impact on neighborhoods, but also in terms of whether it's really the best use for the site to have only a single user tying it up for the entire season.
Okay. Anybody else want to make an input? I'll wait to comment last. But
Yeah, Jim.
Tom, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah,
Tom Roach?
Yes. I think that Bruce Murphy gave a pretty comprehensive report in regards to his examination, going out there and getting a lot of details. And I just hope everyone had a chance to read that.
Yeah, I tell you, Bruce has been wonderful in this process. He's out there on a regular basis and has worked with Adam to resolve some of the issues. Jack, do you have any comments before I make mine?
Well, I kind of agree with David that we might be better off with single events rather than have somebody tie it up for the whole season. I'm not even sure if that would be more lucrative for the town, but it couldn't be any less lucrative, I would think.
Okay, so here's some general comments just to catch up. I have not attended a physical concert as a attendee, but have been to the area a number of times. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised the neighbors haven't called the police on me because I have not introduced myself to any of them. I have parked in the street in many of the areas, so and if any of them are listening, I drive a white pickup truck so that you know that's me in the future. I have been going out. I did go to the neighborhood to, I forgot the name of the concert it was. Oh gosh, just came out of my head. But I could hear like a mumbling of sound, but not like I was in a concert hall. So I think, from talking to Adam at our last presentation and to seeing some of the things, it appears to me that if we could bring a partner in, he and his team have been one of the better types of partners we could have. They've been trying to meet with the neighborhood and address any concerns, and that's the type of people and venue that we want there, that people are willing to listen to what the neighbors are concerned about. With regards to making the site available for a single user, don't have to tell anybody that 2020 is not your normal year. I don't think it's any of our intents to turn this facility over to making it a concert facility on a regular daily basis. Our vision has always been a recreational use for the entire community, and to use the venue for a number of types of things, such as the Seaside Festival, or the Chamber of Commerce is talking about maybe doing a winter festival. So those types of things, but using the grounds as a park and passive recreation will probably be, post-COVID, the predominant use of the facilities. I don't envision us, or the selectmen, actually it wasn't our call, it's the selectmen's call, as far as the number of days and times that they licensed this organization to participate. So I would agree with David. I don't think it's beneficial to sublease, if you will, on an annual basis to any particular organization. I think we need to be flexible and listening to, the opportunities for a number of different venues to take place throughout the course of the year. One of the things we did talk about was the location of the screens, and those screens face towards the neighborhood, which was where the original drive-in screens were placed. And keeping in mind, this was, if you think of what Adam's team had to do, it was pretty quick for them to be able to set everything up. And I think if any of you went out there during the beginning, it was like a bunch of ants climbing all over the place. It was just lots of people trying to get something set up. And I think maybe if we had the opportunity to start over again, we might suggest that the screens be on the opposite side, facing with everybody's music, et cetera, heading towards the river versus towards Iroquois Boulevard neighborhood, Pawnee, Narragansett, that particular Appleby, that area. And that might be a solution in the future with regards to sound emanating. I think you all remember Adam talked to us in great detail about sound and the technology that is advanced today. So, I have some comfort level that we can be able to control sound better than we could control sound in the 1970s or any rock concerts or any concerts any of us had gone to when we were younger. The technology has improved, so that's comforting as well. Egress in and out of the facility has been done really well. They can empty the property out in about 15 minutes. I've talked to the police. The police have had no major complaints. I've talked to a number of people who have attended events who have all been very pleased and observed things like the number of monitors that are walking around during an event to ensure that people are I think there's somebody like who's on like and I don't know, maybe we can check with Adam, but I think there's somebody like sitting on the stage somewhere with a panic button that if somebody beeps a horn, they push that button and a sign comes up that says respect your neighbors or something like that. At least that's what's been reported to me by a couple of people. It said one time somebody beeped a horn and instantaneously something came up on the screen that basically said, respect your neighbors, don't honk your horn. So, again, it's another example of them trying to do everything that they can to be good neighbors. And I think part of what we need to express to the neighborhood and the neighbors that are concerned today is that this is a work in progress, and these are trial balloons in an unusual year. So that we can look at things like what works and what doesn't, what we want to do in the future as far as developing the property, and what we don't want to do. And I think these are the same types of discussions that we've had when we first talked about the boardwalk and how we went over to Gateway Isles and looked across to see what the visual would look like and met with the neighbors. I think we need to make sure we keep this as an ongoing process of hearing from the community. I live on the north side, so I can't hear it, but it's still my town, and I want to make sure my neighbors in the community are, being heard. Some things, no matter what, some people just won't be happy with no matter what we do. Right. I recognize that, but I think it's important to listen to those people who have concerns and try to address them as best we can. And I think Adam has clearly demonstrated that above and beyond. To be honest with you, I'm thrilled that he has been proactive and really, that's the type of whether or not on a regular basis, but those are the type of companies that we want to be able to bring in here that are going to listen to us, listen to our concerns, listen to our neighbors' concerns, so that when we do move forward, we can make sure we try to address any of those concerns, such as the location of the screens, and if we put a pavilion in, where that should be physically located because of the issues of sound. Those are the things that we're learning. This is a learning curve. I think we need to address a couple of other issues with regards to things like beer and wine licensing. I think if we're going to be able to attract festivals and other events and to this site, we need to have some cooperation from the Board of Selectmen with regards to issuing beer and wine permits for those events. It became quite clear to me that, beer and wine sales are no different to these types of events than they are to a local restaurant, to the lifeblood. You don't make money on a steak, you make money on the glass of wine that goes with it. Well, I think I'm hearing generally the same type of thing with these festivals, that, they weren't making any money on the movies, and I know the concerns about beer and alcohol in cars. I think there's ways to prevent, sitting in your car, and I don't think that serving beer and alcohol at any of these events is any different than serving beer and alcohol across the street at Captain Parker's. If you have dinner and you have 2 glasses of wine, we ask for the third, Jerry's not going to give you it. And they're not going to let you get in your car and drive away drunk. And I can't imagine that we'll allow that same type of thing to happen at the drive-in site. Those types of concerns I don't think we have. I think there are ways to address those concerns. And, overall, I've been pretty pleased with the end result. I've looked at, if any of you haven't, Kathy has sent us a number of attachments in some emails that have been very enlightening. The demographics, where this organization has been able to reach out. Part of what we talked about previously is having a venue that brings people to our community. Gives them an opportunity to go into our restaurants and our retail establishments, although the retail establishments are difficult now with COVID. But in a normal world, this is the type of things we want to have happen. I think I saw one where it's about 20% of the respondents were from Barnstable County, and the rest were from, off of Cape Cod. And people are coming here from, as far as Boston and Connecticut, to the venue, and I noticed one of their email flyers that they send out. They have looked like partnered with some of the local hotels. Coming to town for a concert, stay in XYZ hotel. Those are the types of things that we want to see happen with this venue, is to bring people here to our community and spend their money not just at the drive-in site, but prior to and after that, to visit local establishments and help them with economic dollars spent in their facilities. So I think those things are working. I think those are the types of things that we wanted to see happen. I think we also need to stress to any citizens who have concerns is to understand that we're in a work in progress. This is a trial balloon. This is not something we're going to do on a regular basis, but it's giving us an opportunity to see what works and what doesn't work, just like we did with the Irish Festival, and we did with, I keep calling it Uncle Cracker's concert, but there was another name for the country, Charlie Daniels and Uncle Cracker. What was that called?
Country Fest.
Country Fest? Mm-hmm. So those types of things are the things that we talked about when we first started with putting together our plan. And that seems to be successful, and that's bringing people to our community. Working with the event sponsors and coordinators to ensure that the concerns of the neighborhood are addressed, I think is a primary concern, whether it be this organization or Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, if that isn't even around anymore. Our circus wanted to come down. We want to make sure that whoever uses the site has a strong understanding of our concerns and our restrictions and the things that we will accept and not accept. And I think we're pretty good right now on making sure that happens. And Kathy or Karen want to weigh in on any of that. As far as response from the town, I've also asked that any correspondence to the town with regards to the drive-in site from individuals, both pro and con, be forwarded to all of us. So we as the drive-in site committee are aware of any of those concerns, and also aware of the things that people are happy with, and things that they like to see, and that they're glad that we're doing. I'm hearing a lot of that. I think that the choice of concerts has been not to my personal tastes. I mean, I got to admit, I'm in the over 60 crowd, so some of these bands, et cetera, are not the type of music that appeals to me, but it appeals to a lot of people who are coming here. And I think that's, if they played, some other kind of music, I might be more willing to go, but I'm just not interested in some of the types of music they have. We found that by looking at the numbers, the drive-in part of it is a difficult thing to do to make any money. So so for anybody to invest in the future to do a drive-in type like Adam has done, keeping in mind COVID, they're not releasing regular first release movies. So anybody who's doing this has to use movies like Adam has, like Jaws and some of the others. And that's not going to get somebody from Boston to drive down here to see Jaws. They'll go on Netflix or something and watch it again. So although the drive-in idea was, I think, right for the time, I don't anticipate that we'll, in the future, redevelop this as a drive-in again. I just don't see that happening. But the opportunity to be able to put, movies in the park there on a somewhat regular basis, where we have lawn and the family can sit on the lawn with the grass and their kids and watch, a family-rated movie. I see that could possibly happen again. I think Yarmouth Rec did it at Homer Park once or twice, so maybe still do. So being able to move that from Homer Park over to the drive-in site might be something we would do. I understand that there are individuals that have concerns. It's what happens when you have a trial balloon, and the first time out in anything, you're going to have, anything we do. First time I launch my boat every year, I've got issues. But as the season goes on, I address those issues, and things get much better. And I think it's the same with what we've dealt with here, is we've had some issues, but they've been dealt with for the most part, and some may still be out there, and we will hear those and address them as best we can. So I think, from my perspective, in reporting back to the selectmen, that I would give everything that we've got to this date a B+. The noise issue is something we're trying to get our hands around, and I think the technology and the steps that Epstein and his group have taken have been widely received as a step in the right direction, and I think they've made great headway in addressing some of that stuff. So, I think that we should be giving a favorable report to the selectmen that, this is a work in progress. We're learning a lot. I certainly am. And we've been also blessed with, some grant money through some hard work with Kathy and Karen. And so we're well on the way to meeting our goal of the finances to be able to develop, to put the park in, and to scrape the lawn and get the bottle caps and ice glass that was left over from the last fill away, and moving forward. So to me, all things look good, but we still have some work to do.
Hey, Jim,
Yes.
I see that
That
we've got Mary
David?
Bilbon as an attendee. can I ask, if she wants to, whether she or for that matter, Kathy or Karen, have any response from the broader business community as to what impact this summer's experience or experiment has had on them?
Absolutely. If she is on, I will ask her to speak. Mary, are you there? Mary, looks like you're muted.
There she is.
Yeah, I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Hi, Mary. Yes, Mary, did you hear David's comments?
I did. So,
And could you address them?
yeah, so from the business community, we really have not had a lot of input. And I can say normally when there's something negative, we do hear that. So I think the fact that we haven't heard any response from the business community, some members have told us that they think what's happening at the drive-in site is very positive because it's drawing people to Yarmouth. I can tell you from the chamber standpoint of any phone calls that we've taken or people come to the visitor center, they're extremely pleased to have that to come to. And we've talked to people from Connecticut, Rhode Island, in New York that have come here specifically for the events happening at the drive-in site. So we know they're staying in the hotels. We know they're going to the restaurants. So as Jim had noted, that has a positive economic impact on Yarmouth.
Great.
Thank you, Mary. I see Bruce is also online here. Bruce Murphy, who is the health department. Actually, Bruce has been the guy who's been getting out there probably more than any of us. So, Bruce, if you can hear me, would you like to make some comments with regards to some of your observations, questions, and concerns that you have?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Bruce.
There you go. Hi, Bruce.
Good, yes, hi. Yeah, I did give an update that you mentioned earlier, Tom mentioned. I was again out there this weekend to listen to or kind of monitor the 3 concerts this weekend. Some improvements have been made on the sound. On Sunday, the front soundboard went up across the stage, and that made a difference. They also had some padding, I'd say in the ceiling over the drum areas, even though that location changes a little bit. So they're continuing to make improvements to control the sound. I'm mainly there checking the food area, which has been fine. They've toned down the lights and the flashing lights on the food trucks, so that's been helpful. People have been staying in their pod suite locations, doing a very good job, all social distancing and wearing masks. The parking attendants and security and staffing that walk the areas have done a very good job making sure people are staying within their areas and putting their mask on. A couple of other observations of moving the screen maybe to the other end. I think you need to look at that harder because that would be uphill. Right now, that's a high area, so when you stand up there, you kind of look down to the screen, so you're looking over other cars that are in the area. So I think if it was the other way around, you might be looking at cars in front of you. You might not have as good of a view. So I think that the grading needs to be looked at. And I think one of the things I noticed on families or entertainment over the weekend, and even the last couple, was it's more intergenerational. There's families, there's kids, there's middle-aged families there, parents, and then there's some up in our age, Jim, that are still tapping our feet and rocking a little bit. So it's a wide range of people that are attending. But I think they're doing a good job with trying to control the sounds. I have driven on Niagara and over to Pockanocket, and sometimes you can hear it a little bit, the drums more than others, but I think they're doing a good job trying to address the issue.
Thank you, Bruce. Karen or Kathy, something just came into my mind, and I'm wondering, did we have any response or any questions, comments, or concerns from the community during Irish Fest or Country Fest is what you said, right? Country Fest?
I don't recall anything at that time. that certainly didn't come to community development. Sometimes stuff goes elsewhere and we don't necessarily hear about it, but usually somehow it comes around to us. I don't know if Karen has a different
Yeah,
recollection.
we can check, Jim, but my recollection is the same as Kathy. I don't remember hearing, anything negative. Again, it's like what Mary was saying. A lot of times when you don't hear anything, it's generally good stuff. And, it's nice to hear positive feedback when there is such. So I think Bruce's comment and Mary's comments are both good to share.
Did Bruce have something else to add?
Yeah,
Chris?
I would just say on the Irish Fest, a couple times they didn't have enough porta-johns and hand washing
Right.
facilities that we received a couple complaints on that, and they've done better the last year.
Were they predominantly daytime events, though? They have
They
evening
were
time?
kinda
The
like,
Irish Fest, yes. The Country Fest, no.
No, they were on at night.
As Kathy and I went to it and we left, well before the end of the event.
It was at nighttime.
It was definitely at night.
Yeah, it was during the day, and it was wicked hot during the day for that
Yeah.
particular
Oh, wow.
weekend. And then, but it cooled off, and there was a lot more people there in the evening.
Okay.
On Sunday, wasn't in Sunday evening, as I recall. I think it ended at 6. But Saturday night, it definitely went into the evening. I also think
And
the frequency has a lot to do with it. I think, and this might be something that the neighbors are concerned about, is you can accept something that happens on a certain occasional way, but if it's something that's happening every single day or 4 times a week or something, that might be too much. So maybe some of the stuff like Jim says that we're doing this trial balloon, maybe one of the good things we get out of this is we need to decrease the frequency of these things to make it a little bit more manageable for the neighbors. And I think, different types of music that might be more in line with maybe what some of the neighbors want to see. And then they might see some of the benefit of, oh, wow, this is great to have this next to my community, because I can go see it with my friends or my guests, and we can go and enjoy a concert as well.
Now, those other 2 events, they had a stage set up kind of center of the site versus the east side, correct?
They were a little more to the south, like maybe 2/3 to the south, and then they were projecting more towards Route 28.
Right.
The Irish
So-
Festival, I recommend, I remember that there was, the entertainment though was in a tent. They didn't have any outside.
So yeah, that may be a part as well as far as the sound site. David, are you raising your hand or
No,
adjusting
no, I
your
was
TV?
adjusting the camera.
Okay.
The Country Fest
Tom, I
had a
see you
stage.
raising your hand.
okay, well, Jim, you talked briefly about movies, and I'm just curious, were there any sound complaints when the movies played?
I'm not aware of any. Karen or Kathy, are you aware of any movie
No.
complaints?
No, I actually, lots of times when the complaints were people were saying they were fine with the movies, they didn't really hear much of anything associated with the movies. It was really when it started going to live performances that became more of an issue.
Oh,
Yeah.
let me comment on that, Jim, for a minute. The
Go ahead,
sound,
Jack.
the sound at the movies came from your FM radio in your car. There were no loudspeakers or anything like that.
I think that's the same way with the concerts, is it not?
It
Yeah.
is,
Concerts
except the
go through your
complaints seem
radio.
to be about the music that escapes from the broadcast
From
system.
the stage?
Yeah.
From the stage? So, yeah, I remember like when we were there, they had a big plexiglass up around the drums, and we're
Yeah.
trying to do some things with sound that way. And I don't know how much more successful they've been since we first talked, but I know Adam was aware of that. So I'm not sure how you ever are going to be able to have any type of music event that isn't going to put out some sound. After all, music is sound, not visual. So I'm not sure the answer to that, except trying to do the best to keep it as muted as you can for the surrounding areas. And I think some of those technological things that Adam talked about would be the types of things that could achieve some of that. But a concert is music, it's noise. So, but I agree that somebody said maybe fewer than more. I've always found that if something only comes around once in a while, it seems to be something I'd rather go see than if I know every other day there's something going on, the same thing going on. I'm less likely to attend. But if it's, that one event a year, let's not miss the Seaside Festival this year because, the wife has got to buy something at the little stands, then you make sure that weekend you go to the Seaside Festival. But if it were every weekend, you wouldn't get me to go to the Seaside Festival. Not on a regular basis. Jack, did you raise your hand?
I just had a couple of comments. I can remember, I've been around here long enough to remember that there used to be a carnival there every year, every summer at one point. And to be honest with you, we have to emphasize the fact that this has been a summer like no other summer before, or hopefully will ever be again. And if it weren't for the type of pandemic that we have, I don't think we would ever have met Adam Epstein at all, because obviously, if he can run a concert in a huge concert hall and fill it up with tickets, then he's going to be back at doing that rather than fooling around with drive-ins and so forth.
Well, I would certainly agree with you, Jack. This is like no other year any of us have ever experienced, and I hope that detractors of what we're trying to achieve recognize that this is not the norm. It's not what we anticipate to be the norm. And we have made some exceptions to what we originally had thought because of COVID. I don't think any of us ever talked, when we first did our questionnaires, about, let's just bring back the drive-in and get it over with. No, none of us ever really
That was my
thought the
idea.
idea of, was that yours? Of course, David is, he's way ahead of us anyway. So, so you're right, Jack. This is not your normal year, and I don't anticipate. I know I personally won't recommend to the Board of Selectmen that this venue become an everyday venue for concerts or the like. I think we've all envisioned being able to go sit out there with our grandkids on the lawn and have a picnic, or walk along the riverfront and go out to the boardwalk, use the site for some passive recreation. But as well, one of the things we talked about is having the financial ability to maintain this property. There's nothing worse than creating something and and putting the town at a deficit to be able to maintain it. So some of these events that we're looking at are the types of things that are going to help us to maintain the infrastructure, so that we're not tapping into the general fund to be able to clean our bathrooms or mow our lawns or do those types of things. So these other types of events, besides the passive recreation that we anticipate to be probably, I would guess, probably 75 or 80% of the time that the site would be used. But these other events are kind of a necessity to help us pay the bills, if you will. And they achieve the goal of bringing people to our community to support our business and community, like this property is currently doing. So we'll strike a balance through that process, and that's just where we're at. I think it's important, from my perspective, in expressing to the selectmen that, we need to be a little flexible. And I think if Mr. Epstein were to come back and ask for a beer and wine for a weekend, I think my personal opinion is that we should support that. We had beer and wine at the Irish Fest. We had beer and wine at Uncle Cracker. If we're going to have events in the future, we want to attract organizations like Mr. Epstein's, that beer and wine permit will be something that any investor in putting an event here would weigh heavily on them. That helps them pay their bills. And if they can maintain it in a way like our local restaurants have tipped trained people and do all the right things, then I don't see any reason why we can't provide a temporary liquor licenses for beer and wine at the venue for on a case-by-case basis, depending upon what it is they want. Does anybody else have any opinions and comments about beer and wine licenses? Or
I think the COVID constraints are one of the big problems for this season and this kind of a request for beer and wine. I think that the control of the sale and the distribution is a challenge. I think Bruce has worked with Adam and come up with a plan that seems pretty comprehensive. I would not oppose their request for if you want to look at it as an experimental trial balloon as to how that could work for the benefit of future users as to what the business model might be at this site. I think that's a reasonable request as long as the selectmen accept it and as long as it's for a confined and defined period of time. On the other hand, if we're going to assume and hope that our situation this summer is not representative of the future, then I don't know how good a test it is for future events if we're not going to have those constraints in the future. So I think it's worth a try. I think everybody's going to be looking over their shoulder, and they'll probably be able to pull it off without any significant adverse effects. If it makes the site a more attractive venue for future users because they'll have that experience. We talked from the very beginning about Kathy and Karen sort of building a file that if somebody wants to come into town and say, well, could I use that site for something, they can pull out past users and say, well, these people did this and they were successful, and these people did this and they weren't. If that builds up their portfolio and helps future users assess the site, then that's probably a good thing for us to have in our records. And I would not oppose that kind of a limited request, with the understanding that not only we, but more importantly, the selectmen are going to have to make a decision on a case-by-case basis for every type of use that comes in, and some they will consider appropriate and some they won't. And just because we've endorsed it or they've allowed it in the past doesn't mean that everybody can do the same thing. I think it's got to be, at least for quite a while we experiment with these types of uses, it's got to be a very much a case-by-case review. And as long as there's that understanding among us, I guess, and among the general public, I wouldn't recommend for the committee against their request if that's what they're going to go forward with for. I thought they said they needed 2 consecutive weekends in order to make it worthwhile for the investment they had to make to get vendors and materials and equipment down to make it work. So that's okay with me, I guess.
Anybody else any comment on that or any other comment?
Well, yeah, Jim.
Go ahead, Tom.
We're going to be making a recommendation to the selectmen. And would it be in the form of a vote relative to this alcohol issue? Or would it be just a recommendation?
Well, I think to get a recommendation, we need to have a vote amongst ourselves.
Exactly.
Rather than me just say what I think, I want to hear from the whole board as to your opinions, as to,
Would you like that in the form of a vote?
If you would like to make a motion to that, we can
would.
certainly discuss that.
Yep. I would like to
Okay,
make a motion to
Go ahead.
recommend temporary use of alcohol for the 2 times that Mr. Epstein has requested, just to get a sense, a feeling of how that would work out.
And is there a second to that?
Can I make a comment before you second it? I
Sure.
think it probably
Yeah,
should be our recommendation, if it's the opinion of the board, that it not just be a temporary license for those 2 weekends, but that it be implemented according to the recommendations, or at least with consideration of the recommendations that Bruce Murphy's put together for how it would be handled. We don't want to bind the selectmen to that, but I think we want to probably mention that we appreciate the thoroughness with which Bruce has put together that plan, that it should be some kind of a controlled use like that.
Well, I think that, our committee is going to make that recommendation to the selectmen, but they're going to have the nuts and bolts relative to the procedure, I would think.
Okay.
You would think, but let's make sure, I don't disagree with either of you, and my added comment to that would be, well, let's make sure that the board has and that Bruce has shared with Mr. Epstein that policies and procedures so that both the selectmen and Mr. Epstein are on the same page as to what is suggested. So let's make sure that if we do make that recommendation, that the board actually has an opportunity to see that. And
Perhaps,
maybe
Jim,
ask.
since Mr. Epstein is also monitoring this meeting as an attendee, that we would encourage him to adopt and to incorporate into his application as many of Bruce's recommendations as he thinks are appropriate for his site. I think one of
Exactly.
the selectmen's concerns in the past was that his request was rather open-ended, and they wanted a little more defined request as to exactly what it was they were approving, and if he incorporated a full scenario of how he would implement it, such as Bruce's recommendations, I think that might be received a little bit better by the selectmen.
Mr.
I would
Chairman,
agree. Yes. Who is that, Jack?
yeah, I just thought I'd second the motion so we could move along in discussion.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Okay, there's a second to the motion. David, did you want to say something?
Nope, all set.
Okay.
Did we amend the
All right.
motion based on David's conversation?
No, I think, I don't know. Jim, did you, or Tom, did you?
Tom made the motion.
Okay.
Tom, do you
Yeah.
need to amend that?
If you like, what was the discussion point?
Just that we somehow incorporate the fact that we want to encourage the types of controls that Bruce Murphy has put together for the implementation of the alcohol sales.
Well, wouldn't
can I
that be automatic
Well,
from Bruce's perspective?
no,
No.
I think it would be up to the selectmen to impose those conditions. And I
Okay.
just want them to know that we're aware of them and that that's part of our consideration.
Yeah.
So could I help you craft this, Tom, if I could? The
Sure.
motion would be to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, to support the idea of a beer and wine permit, utilizing the recommendations of the Bruce Murphy and the Health Department.
Exactly.
Does that sound right? Dave, that sound right too?
Yep,
Okay, Tom, so if you agree with that, would you so make that motion? That
I
know you're
do,
going to say all right, what
moved.
Jim said, right?
yes.
All right.
I would second it as it's been amended, but I would add a further amendment that we're presenting this as an experiment to find out
Yes.
whether it works or it doesn't work.
Correct. And I think we need to make, it's my intention to be at the selectmen's meeting and be able to express those types of concerns. And I would echo what David said, is the bottom line is the Board of Selectmen and the Liquor Licensing Board, which is the Board of Selectmen, they have, it's their say. We're only making a suggestion, and it's up to them to decide what they think is best through the guidance and information that we're providing them. But David is right. We need to understand that this will be a case-by-case basis. If a children's party wants to come in there and want a beer and wine for the adults, I think that's probably not something we would want to endorse. But, so the selectmen will have to look at each type of event that is coming now into perpetuity, because we can't just put a beer and wine license out forever. But each organization or that would want to have a beer and wine is going to have to do the same process of going in front of the licensing board and apply and meet the criteria that whatever the criteria the selectmen put in front of them.
Mr. Chairman, it would appear that I offered an amendment to include the words "as an experiment," but I haven't received a second, so I guess my amendment died.
Well, I haven't asked for a second yet, Jack, so I apologize. So is there, now I will ask, is there a second to Jack's amendment?
yes.
Okay, so David seconded the amendment. So we have a motion on the floor or on the internet or wherever we're on these days. We're not on the floor. To support the idea of a beer and wine license and to address that it is an experiment.
Exactly.
So I would add,
In essence,
All right.
we're going to bring it to the 1 yard line. The selectmen are going to take it over.
yep, or throw a pass instead of running and
There you go.
no. So I will do a quick roll call vote of that. All those in favor, say aye. David,
Aye.
Jack,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
and myself is aye, so that's unanimous. That we will recommend to the Board of Selectmen our support of a beer and wine license, understanding that this is an experiment. So that's the key to what we wanted to try to accomplish in this meeting.
Yes.
Kathy, Karen, any input, any extra comments that we need to make?
I guess I think it might be good to kind of, one of the things that they wanted, I think, input from the DISAC on was how you felt about the existing operation and how that was going. And I think there's been a lot of comments that have been made here that Karen and I can put into a letter, and maybe if it's amenable to the group, this might be something where we can finalize it and send it to David and Jim for final review and editing like we've done prior.
Yeah, David's far better at punctuation than I am, so.
Very good.
He caught that space last time. Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, if anybody's got any additional comments, but I think what I'm getting here is in general that we've been very pleased with the Epstein organization and their willingness to listen and to try to address any concerns that the public has had. And they've been trying to be good neighbors, and I think that's important that we express
Very
that to the board, that this is the type of organizations that we would like to have come in to utilize our facilities, that can bring in people from Connecticut and New York and staying in our hotels and eating in our restaurants and, you know, doing all the things that we envisioned this to begin at the onset, but also to recognize that this is not your normal year. And the suggestions and recommendations that we're making today apply to today as a learning learning process, and that when COVID is gone, we may want to revisit some of these things and come up with some other issues that might need to be addressed, or lacks of some of the other issues. But with COVID, this is unique, and I, for one, am praying that next summer we don't have the same issue.
I think we
Hear,
can,
hear.
as a committee, compliment the Epstein Group for how they've done this. Whether we personally would have chosen a different format or a different type of arrangement or not, I think having pulled it together on very short notice, we got to cut them a little slack on that. I think it's by the same token, we can also comment that a good organization such as Mr. Epstein's company could do a much better job of planning in the future when they have more time and more logistical information and more experience in order to mix up the events and to address concerns or avoid concerns of neighbors or other entities. So I think that's both a compliment and a suggestion for the future, that they've done a good job with what they had to work with. They can do better, and they will do better if they or a similar organization comes forward with another plan. But that more specificity and planning would be better in the future when we have the time to do that.
I think that's an important thing to express to the board is to, you know, keep in mind, this isn't an organization that we talked to back in December and said, hey, what do you think? This was really, and, you know, kudos to them. I mean, they put this all together within weeks versus having, you know, months to plan. So given greater amount of time to plan and to address some of these things, I can only imagine it would even be better. But you're right, David, that, you know, given that time that they had, I think they've done an admirable job. So I think we should express that as part of our comments, Kathy.
Yep.
Your
No,
hand was up.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things that has been mentioned is an RFP for next year, request for proposals for people to utilize the site next year. And that's trying to get ahead of the curve so that we're being more proactive than reactive to people who have come to us. It's a little more difficult because we don't know what the COVID-19 situation will be next year. I have a feeling, you know, we have the potential of being somewhat similar to what we have now. or we have the potential to be in a much better position. So I think at some point we need to start thinking about what we want to put out for an RFP, or maybe you ask the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday. Is that something you want us to do, and to help us get some parameters about that? And that's when I was talking about maybe some of the things that might be parameters have to do with the frequency of events and the size of events, and but we also need, if you're going to put out an RFP, you need to let people know ahead of time, is alcohol going to be on the table or is it not? And you're going to get totally different responses depending on the answer to that question, as well as amplification, if that's something that you guys want.
Good point.
So we already have an application that an individual can complete, correct?
Yes, but it's not a request for proposals where we would set very specific
Correct.
parameters of everything that we want and then have actual review criteria. This year we, and unexpectedly because of COVID, created this business opportunity, and we ended up having 2 people putting forward proposals, and we kind of had to weigh them very quickly without a lot of different specific criteria, and ultimately the Board of Selectmen chose Adam's firm to move forward with, and I think that they've shown themselves to be a very competent and professional organization. I think it made things go much more smoothly this summer.
Kathy, can't we put out a more blanket request for proposals for anything anybody wants to use that facility for next year? I mean, we may get people who only want to use it for one day or one weekend. And if we get enough of those, then we might be disinclined to accept a proposal that was for an entire seasonal use. But if we don't, if the only people who respond indicate that they have a longer term use proposed, then maybe we'd be more inclined to refine that and disregard the occasional uses that might otherwise want to use it. Can't we just put out it's not so much a request for proposal, but just advertise the fact that it's available and we want to know what people want to do with it next year?
David, you're asking for more of like a request of interest,
Okay,
is the way it sounds to me.
Yep.
I think that we can do it. I think that, I'm speaking for myself and from a internal logistic, and I haven't talked about this with Kathy or anyone here, and I certainly can't speak for the Board of Selectmen, right? But I think logistically, it does make sense to me that you would have a primary user of the site, just because there's a lot of setup, there's a lot of permitting, and every time there's different iterations, I like the idea of having the templates and we have the file on how to do it. But when you have many different users, you're often kind of reinventing the wheel over and over every time and doing that kind of advertising. So I think that if you did want to do something very informal, like, hey, who out there is interested in using the site? I think you can do that to gauge interest on an informal basis. But I think we'd also want to do that very quickly, because I think we need to do the RFP and get going. Because for a larger scale user, perhaps someone like Adam, they need to get going. People, as far as advance as they can to get the best lineup possible, especially if we're asking more of a variety of artists too, like the committee discussed earlier.
I think it's helpful to set what you don't want. If you don't want events every single weekend like we have now,
Right.
I think it's important for people to know that. The problem with letters of interest is you got no skin in the game. I just put in a letter and I'm interested, and we got that with the marina, and it didn't really mean anything and it didn't really go anywhere. If you have an RFP with certain parameters, then you can put it out there for everybody and kind of see what they have. But people know what the maximum you're going to tolerate on that site, and then people can always come in below that. I just want to let Jim know that Adam has his hand raised, and I don't know if you want me to unmute him.
Okay, but before we go to Adam, yes, we're glad to hear from Adam. I think we need to have a discussion separate from this as to, do we really think that we want to have an organization come in and take over the facility for the season, or do we want to be able to allow some flexibility to, bring in different types of? I mean, if we, put an RFP out and somebody says, I want the facilities for the entire summer, and we say yes to that, then that precludes any other opportunity to use the facility for whatever else may be. Karen, I see you. Before I go to Adam, I'm going to see Karen has her hand up, so I'm going to let Karen comment,
Thanks,
and then I'll go
Jim.
to Adam.
I think that that's something too that, you know, an RFP, the way an RFP works is generally we have qualitative and you can have quantitative criteria. But the qualitative criteria, you could include a measure that says, you know, how much do you want to use the site exclusively? Are you willing to, you know, make it available and under what conditions when you're not using it? That kind of thing. But I think, again, it's going back to what Kathy said. We can say what we don't want. And I think that if you don't want someone to have, you know, exclusive use of the site all the time, you can say that. And you can say, oh, well, we want to make it available to community groups, you know, X time or X times a week or whatever.
And they could be for town events.
Correct.
Okay. Kathy, if you can unmute Adam and ask him to step in and click in or whatever you do to say what he's going to say.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Adam.
Adam, are you there?
Hi, Adam.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, so thanks for inviting me to listen in today. I did just want to add a comment about what you're talking about right now, which is the notion of an exclusive user. And what I'd like to add is that we are not asking, nor did we ever ask, to be the exclusive user. We were asking to be the exclusive operator. And the difference is that we, throughout the summer, have offered the site for use to people that wanted to use it. There have been several colleges that wanted to do graduations, and they wanted to do different things on the site. Unfortunately, several of them and community groups. There was a condo association that wanted to hold a meeting there. Unfortunately, what happened is several of them were asking to use things like the screens and to use the stage and to use staffing and to have and to ask for infrastructure that was going to require us to pay personnel. And so what they found is that they didn't have the budget to do it, but the site was always available as a community gathering space. But unfortunately, they were all obligated to operate under the standards that we've set for COVID safety and for hiring of personnel. So while we have been the only people to present shows on the site, we have not been the exclusive user of the site. We have just been the only user of the site. So we have never been or considered ourselves exclusive. We have considered ourselves the site management company. And what I would always recommend is to consider your future endeavors here to be under the domain of a management organization who can uphold standards of operating and procedures under pre-COVID, post-COVID, no COVID. You always want to have somebody who understands that this is potentially a universal attraction for the town of Yarmouth, and that you want it upheld as a beacon and attraction to the town that speaks to the standards that you want it to speak to, so that you have the opportunity to hold food festivals, community meetings, town meeting, public free movies in the park. All of these things are possible under a no COVID environment. They're even possible under a COVID environment. They just cost more to exhibit because of the safety measures you have to put in place. I mean, everything from the porta potty cleanup to the number of people monitoring the site. For example, just to give you an idea, like Mary and I, if Mary's still on the call, Mary and I are working on a potential community Halloween event for school kids where we've offered the site for free. And we've agreed to maybe to jointly pursue a sponsor to help us with some of the staffing costs so that we could have families and kids come and do a safe trick-or-treating thing on Halloween, which falls on a Saturday. So it's what we would recommend if we had the opportunity is that you look at somebody who can uphold the standards as a site operator and manager, but not exclusively managing what events happen in the site. They just uphold your standards, because running a venue properly takes a lot of work. And you'd want somebody who's cognizant and understanding of the neighborhood concerns, as well as the technical capacity of the venue itself. So I just want to make sure that there's an understanding that we never considered ourselves the exclusive operators to the exclusion of other parties. And we've actively engaged with other organizations who were attempting to rent the space. But unfortunately, when you have to have 50 monitors roaming the aisles for a safe event, and each of them gets paid between $17 and $22 an hour, that cost alone can be prohibitive to even the best cause. And so but in Mary's case, she's talking about finding volunteers to help out underwrite those expenses, and bank sponsors and other organizations who can offset the cost. So, that's what I just wanted to add, is that, we'd be very interested in being an organization in business with the town of Yarmouth to continue to help you uncover the revenue streams of how the old drive-in site can become a civic and public gathering space, but also a location for commercial use that can help continue to yield entertainment attractions to town that fill your restaurants and hotels and other retail businesses. So that's really what I wanted to add, is just to keep it that we consider ourselves the operators, not the exclusive users.
Thank you, Adam. I think that's an important clarification that we all need to make sure we understand, is that, and I do know from my connections at the college that they had reached out to you, and having watched graduation the other day, because my wife was speaking and I had to listen to her speak. Otherwise I wouldn't have watched it. It was very COVID. It was a difficult thing for them to do, and having a venue like the drive-in site, it probably would have been something a whole lot more entertaining and certainly rewarding to those individuals who would have to cross the stage to receive their diplomas. It was kind of a strange way to watch the graduation. But so I do know that other organizations have indeed looked at and reached out to Adam and his group to see if they could make something work. So
I don't know if I'm still on, but
yeah, go ahead.
But sorry to interrupt. We never really considered it something that would be contributing to like a profit center or anything. It was just like, we know that there are good intentions and we want to be community oriented and engage people. And in all honesty, the more people that come through the site, the better the site does long term. It doesn't have a really great history over the last 40 years, and it's not really been known as a public gathering space. So if you have graduations and community events, those are good public relations attempts to rebrand and re-identify the site as a great place to gather. So we would have loved to have been able to host those events. Unfortunately, those organizations just, frankly, in times like this, we're running short of the budget it would have taken to safely endeavor to produce them.
Right. Thank you, Adam. I think
Thank you.
some of what Adam says makes strong sense. I mean, if you look at the Barnstable County Fairgrounds, they have a manager that runs everything there, coordinates, whether it's the beer festival or a food truck festival or the county fair itself. They have a management team in place so they can address and are aware of all the issues and how to make sure everything goes smoothly. And I think that's something we might want to strongly discuss in the future meetings, as to how we go forward, and do we put a management agency in place that can coordinate the different types of events, and to coordinate a schedule of events, so that we know that, hey, on August 5th through the 10th, there's nothing scheduled, so yeah, you can come have your dog show here. So I think that's an important discussion we should have in the future. Anybody else have anything else to add before we wrap this up?
No?
Jack McCormick, Mr.
Go ahead.
Chairman, if I could, maybe a 1 or 2 word statement on what's going on with the Riverwalk. Anything, Lee?
Just quickly, you are aware that we just received $1 million grant. Our total dollars, Kathy, do you know what the total dollars we currently have in the bank, if you will? The grants and the.
I think it's $4.2 million now, and then that's still with the $1.5 million outstanding in CPA. So if we get the CPA, we only have $800,000 for construction that we need. What we need to be concentrating on is finalizing the design and permitting. Keep getting distracted with COVID and all of these other things
Right.
that are time sensitive. So we really need to get back to that and get Beta on board. We do have a scope of services from them. Unfortunately, it's higher than what we have funds available for. We were really hoping to get them to help us with some of this event space planning. You'll find in your packet there was that actual information that went to CPA because they were asking for an update, and also has the budget in there. So if you're interested in that, but we did CEDC did authorize some tourism revenue preservation funds for a consulting firm called The Fifth Element to take a look and help us with some of the layout for the event space, separate from what we will be doing with Beta. Unfortunately, they're from Canada and they haven't been able to get into the country, so we're kind of questioning how we kind of move forward with them. So that's something that we need to take a look at. But I think we really need to stop worrying so much about construction funds and make sure that we get the design and permitting done. But all of this information that Adam has provided free of cost has been immeasurable and greatly appreciated to kind of help identify to us some of the different things that we would need on the site, as well as from the previous events that we had. Just like David was saying, we do know different types of things that are needed on the site. It's just specifying the location. I just want to bring to your attention, Jim, that Raymond Dewey does have his hand raised. He's in a butter if you're interested in having me unmute him.
Okay, before you do that, I want to ask a question that has nothing to do with anything except what is that over your right shoulder? It looks like an X-ray.
Over there?
Oh, excuse me, your left shoulder. No, your
I think
right
it's
shoulder.
Kathy's fan.
Your right shoulder.
This right here?
Yeah, what is that? What is that? It looks like an X-ray.
It's actually Karen's fan that I stole and brought into my office.
Oh,
it does look
it looks
strange.
like a chest X-ray or something for me. I'm like, what the heck? You got an X-ray hanging on.
That's
Okay.
the ghost that inhabits my office in the corner.
Got it. Okay. It's just, I've been looking at it. It doesn't look like a fan from my
It
view,
doesn't.
but anyway.
It's on the side, not the front. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I've cleared that up because it's been concerning that you had an X-ray hanging in your room.
I hope never to have that.
and I hope you don't either. So you had indicated that Mr. Dewey, did you say?
Raymond Dewey. Yep. If you give me
Okay,
a
and-
second, I will.
Yeah.
There he is. He just
Okay,
needs to
and
unmute
Mr.
himself.
Okay. Oh, I clicked this button. I can see. Okay. He has his hand up, but he's muted. Okay. So we'll give him a second to either unmute or we'll move on.
There. He is.
There. Okay, good.
Okay.
Well, first of all, go ahead, Jim.
Before you start, Mr. Dewey, if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself as to, are you in a butter? Are you just a casual observer?
So I'll give you a little background. I am in a butter. I live at 37 Pawnee Road. I've had this property since 1984. I know your brother, Bobby, because I was either in Pete Marwick Mitchell with him in Boston and or in the Rotary back in the 70s here in Hyannis. I was active at Halcyon and on the board of directors there, and I got to know Harold Hayes. I know Tom Roach is one of his neighbors is Mark Anschultz, and I've worked with Mark on a number of different issues regarding good things for the Episcopal Church. And I was on the West Yarmouth Library Association. I ended up in New York City and then, retired and had this place here and a place in Tucson. So to make the story as quick and concise, is that I was really, first of all, I want to thank Kathy for the time that she has given me and David as well, and also Adam. And I realized that there's some tough issues here. I seldom ever did anything right the first time. And one of the things that I did with my son is, we learn by doing. we make mistakes. The idea is to minimize the downside risk. But when I got the butter notice, I was really excited. I said, my gosh, they're finally going to get the square peg in the square hole and have movies at the drive-in theater coming in through your speakers and or through your radio, the FM radio. And I thought, so I didn't bother to respond. My wife and I got here, and I'm a frustrated amateur astronomer. I'm out on the first night that they're doing the show ET. I look up and I said, boy, that's an aurora borealis. Well, it wasn't. It was the lights coming out from the theater and weird noises. So the issue was, seemed to have been a major disconnect from what I read and my neighbors read about what was going to be performed here. I'm hearing hard breathing from somebody. We get that out distracting. That
Whoever that is, stop breathing.
Yeah, stop breathing.
It's you, Jim.
It's you, Jim.
Is it me?
Yes, it is you.
Yeah.
All right, I'll stop breathing.
Well,
My wife will be happy to hear that.
Do your best. We'll resuscitate you. So yeah, the bottom line is it's a major disconnect, and I'm a reasonable person, and I travel with Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, and Madonna in my car, and I love music. And I was good friends with Don Law years ago, a major promoter. So
Don Law Productions.
Yeah. But the issue is so I can't sit in my house with the windows shut and talk to my wife or have company over, or for fear that my granddaughter, if it was 4 months old, was going to be awoken from some of the noise that's over there. And I, first of all, background, I called the police because the police are responsible for law enforcement. And I asked them to come down here and listen. And I've done this twice. And the police say, oh no, our people at the theater are aware of the noise ordinance and they're managing this. So Mary Ellen and I got together and I looked up, the documents. There's an agreement that says no amplified sound. So I wonder how many of you have expertise in what's amplified or not amplified. I had a nice discussion with David. Sound doesn't travel in a straight line. It reverberates in a circle out from the source. You can control it with amplification. I've talked to Adam about this, who's really trying hard. And I really mean this. I have a lot of respect for Adam for what he's doing and what he's done in terms of what he's put together for a business. And it's very, very, very highly qualified. But the fundamental issue is I and my neighbors that I've talked to, they're here for quiet. When the drive-in theater was working, you didn't hear noises over here. You seldom even saw the lights. And so the bottom line is the ambient noise level is very low here. It's a really distraction when you can, windows shut. That's disturbing. You can't go to bed. My wife likes to go to bed at 10 o'clock. It's disruptive. And I think when you talk to, was it Peters, read his letter at 8 Niagara. Or not, it's just not good. So I don't know what Adam could do more than he has done to manage this issue. And I think that Kathy hit it right in the sense that if this is going to be a routine thing, that's a very negative impact on the quality of life of people that have been here for many years. There's quite a few families on this side. We call it the West Bank rather than the East Bank of Parker's River. And I don't know yet or have much feel for what's going on the other side, but I can't imagine it's enjoyable. So, and my other question really was to David, who's on your board or this committee that is, from an environmental point of view, aware of what noise pollution is all about? We worry about global warming, but noise pollution is a major problem in the planet, and people need and have a right to have peace and quiet in their homes. So it's also destructive of value. of property value. So think about that as you're going along. And I also would say, come on over to our house or to any of the abutters while there's a poor performance and listen. All right, you're welcome.
Thank you,
That's
Mr.
all.
Dewey.
Yes.
I can tell you that as far as I'm aware, unless somebody's got a secret talent that I'm not aware of, no members of the committee are experts on noise, but I can tell you that one of us is at least an expert on the impact and value of anything. I'm a real estate appraiser and have the ability to measure the impacts of various things on value. I was deeply involved in an issue where they were putting a cell tower inside of a church. Although the neighbors were concerned and had expressed numerous concerns about a cell tower in the church, we were unable to find any evidence nationwide that it would affect value. But it's always something that you have to think about and look at as to whether it does have an impact. I sometimes get a chuckle. I watched the thing on leaf filters the other day, and they said it'll add value to your house. Well, I can assure you that what you have leaf filters on your gutters is not going to add value to your house.
Right.
But people will consider it, and it's up to us to also, as the board, the DISEC committee, to be aware of that. And when we went through our original process of taking into consideration what is the effect on the neighborhoods of the things that we do. So I appreciate that comment, and I think it's good for us as the committee to keep that in mind. And I think we've been very, very diligent on trying to make sure that we hear the concerns of the community. This is our town too. We all live here. We sit in the same churches as each other and go to the same restaurants, and so we're going to see each other. Those of us that are not on the committee and those of us that are, and we all want to be able to say that, hey, we've done a good job. And part of that is to hear the concerns that people like yourself have and try to address them. And I think that's going to be an ongoing process that our committee won't stop, but always trying to hear the concerns of the community. And when we did the original process of developing, we've, just so you understand, Mr. Dewey, is that we had a site visit like we had a couple weeks ago. We had a site visit over the Gateway Isles, and to physically go to the points of the roads and look across the marsh to see if a boardwalk would have a negative impact, both visually and through value. So we've looked at those types of things, and we'll continue to look at those as far as the development of the site and moving forward. So I hear your concerns. I want you to be assured that we, as a committee, are hearing them and are doing everything we can to try to make sure we mitigate as best we can. And one of the examples of us mitigating and compromising, if you will, is I think the majority of our board was more in favor of a longer boardwalk out into the marsh versus what we agreed to as part of our compromise is more of a loop. Because of the concerns of the community, of the neighbors on the east side of the river. So that's a demonstration of how we're willing to work with the neighborhood, and we will continue to work with the neighborhood in the future. I live near the Bray Farm, and every so often they have a fence at the Bray Farm, and it's not easy for me to turn down my road because the parking lot is full, and there's a hayride going on, and there's little kids all over the place. That's just part of doing business, and I can accept it being on an occasional basis. And I hear your concerns that if I think I too would be concerned if Jay Giles band or somebody else was playing every single night in my backyard. If it was Diana Krall and Chris Boddy, I might be a little bit more happy because then I can listen to nice jazz with a nice glass of wine. And my wife would like it too. But I appreciate your comments and your input. I will say hello to my brother Bob for you. I'm sure
Was
he'd
he
love to
in
hear your
Pete or
name.
was he in the Rotary? This was, this was back in
I,
the late 60s but I remember him.
yeah, I don't know if he was I was a Rotarian, but Bob
Uh-huh.
wasn't.
Right.
Bob is now down in Georgia. So,
Okay.
and he was the one. His board, when he was Board of Selectmen, he was the ones that purchased the site originally in 1985. He was
Hey.
chairman of the Board of Selectmen then. So we're just trying to clean up his mess.
Well, we want
Once
we
again.
want to help. We want to help you get the square peg in the square hole, all right, and not a round peg in a square hole, Jim. So.
And I would encourage you to continue to provide us with some input. We do want to hear from the neighbors, and not only the neighbors, but from the community as a whole. And I think we've talked a little bit to Adam about possibly being able to put some questionnaires in his correspondence with his patrons as well to get some feedback as to the things that we can do better and the things that we shouldn't be doing. I'm of the belief that, when I'm, much older and much grayer, we can all look back and say, hey, we did a pretty good job. And I think, I look at the Cultural Center as an example, and I can tell you that as the chairman of and founding president of the Cultural Center of Cape Cod, we had a lot of concerns from the neighborhood, and we listened to them. And I defy anybody to tell me that the Cultural Center is anything but successful.
Right.
So with that as a blueprint as to how we move forward and always listening to our neighbors, we will continue to do that. And I'll be honest with you, we may not be able to do everything you would like us to do, but we're going to listen to you, and we're going to try to come to some common ground as a drive-in site committee, as a community, and as any individual organizations that utilize the site to be sure that it's a win-win for everybody.
Right.
But I'd appreciate your continued input. Without, I always tell people, my wife once said to me, "Why'd you send back your meal?" Well, if they don't know that the chef is a lousy chef, they can't fix it. Well, if we don't know that what we're doing is lousy, we can't fix it.
Right.
So
They call
whether
it
you have
feedback.
a plus, exactly, and we want more. We want all of it, and we encourage you to continue. And I will tell you as well as your neighbors to reach out to us and let us know. And it sounds like Adam's been very receptive to listening and coming over and meeting with you all and addressing those concerns. And we as a drive-in site committee will continue to do the same.
Yeah, he's reached out, and again, David and Kathy as well have been. I'm impressed. You've got some good people. That's what I can say. I mean that from my heart. So, yeah.
Well, we appreciate that. With that, if nobody from the committee has any additional comments or concerns, Kathy, you want to wrap up what you have heard and give us a Reader's Digest so we can go to dinner?
Oh, that's brutal, Jim.
I mean, we've only been talking for 2 hours. You can't, just give it to me in 2 sentences?
I think the idea is that, there's obviously been a great deal of effort that's been put into the site by Adam, and there's been a lot of good things that have come out of that. We can maybe talk about, originally there were some live shows, and we ended up having to, some movies, and we eventually had to go to some live shows. I think one of the things that Mark Forrest pointed out was, the live shows are still family friendly, even though they're not necessarily, what we were thinking of, like with young kids, which is, I think, is what the movies were more. I think it would be helpful to explain to the board some of the things that Adam has done with regard to the sound and the level of effort that he's put in order to trying to address as much as he can. I think he's really gotten the honking down, which was something that was in violation of our town noise ordinance. The anything between 11 and 7 would have been a violation, but I think a lot of that's the reason the police didn't go out. I know that, David, you had mentioned that, because they weren't violating the noise ordinance if it was before 11 p.m. I do think it's good to note that some of the metrics that Adam has with regard to the people that are being drawn to the site, because that is the original reason why we were hoping to have special events here. And then talking about having the vote that you guys took with regard to support as an experiment, having a couple weekends of alcohol service in October. It sounds as though you're very complimentary also of the work that Adam has done, because he is a rather seasoned event promoter, and I greatly appreciate the way he's handled himself and his crew has handled themselves with regard to hearing from the neighbors, and we greatly appreciate that. So we'll try and put this together in some type of memo and send it to Dave and Jim. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'd appreciate. Yeah, let's get that together, and then and if there is any additional feedback from either like the Chamber of Commerce or others, then we want to be aware of that as well, and we might want to adopt that into what you want to put together. But if you can get something together, and David and I can review it, and he can correct all the grammar. And
ouch! It was a couple spaces.
He's way better at that than I am. That's why I said have David look at it too.
If we can get some additional input from Mary, that would also be helpful, I think, for the selectmen to know.
Yes, we have talked to Mary about that, and we're also meeting, and Karen knows, we're meeting with CEDC as well on Thursday, hoping to get their support as well. They meet at, I believe, at 4:30 on Thursday. So we're trying to as much as you hear people who have some concerns, I think there's also people who have a lot of positive things to say about it as well. So it's good to get both sides of the story.
Okay, great. And I will tell you that now that sailing season is just about done, I'll do my best to try to actually physically go and sit in my car and watch one of these concerts. But my boat is only in the water for so much, and I take advantage of every second I can. Any last comments from any members of the board? Okay, hearing none. Karen, thank you for that wrap-up, and I will look forward to a memo for David and I to
Did
review.
you purposely call me Karen? Did you purposely call me Karen?
Yes, I did.
You did it on purpose, you
Oh,
stinker.
man. That was deliberate abuse.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself. I would ask for a motion for adjournment. Get me out of here before I get killed.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? I don't need to roll call this, do I, Kathy?
No, I think, Karen says yes.
Okay, we'll roll call it. David in favor?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Aye, all in favor. Motion is accepted. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much for participating, and we will be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.